welcome to the Harmony Channel. I am Jason Whitlock, your host. Thank you for joining me. We're going to get right into it because I want to start with a conversation with Tom Ascol. He's with Founders Ministry, and he has started the Give, Send, Go to benefit Vodi Bakum and his family, Vodi Bakum's family. Vodi passed away last week. The minister that had a huge impact on me and other Christian evangelical conservatives. Vodi, in my view, was the intellectual backbone and foundation of those of us that consider ourselves Christian conservatives. Vodi gave us the confidence scripturally to stand on our positions as it relates to DEI, as it relates to affirmative action. Vodi, in my opinion, was the Thomas Sowell of the Bible, the biblical Thomas Sowell. And you need that in a culture war, in a spiritual conflict. If your spiritual foundation isn't strong, you're going to get wiped out and eviscerated. And Vodi gave us a strong spiritual foundation. Vodi passed away. I tweeted about it all weekend, and we've been trying to generate money for Vodi. 9 kids, 7 of them still at home. Vodi was just 56 when he passed away. His wife, Bridget, a traditional stay-at-home wife. They've got 9 kids, 3 grandkids, 7 kids still at home. Vodi made all kinds of financial sacrifices in the name of Jesus Christ. He didn't want to be a rich man. He did not want a podcast and millions of dollars. He wanted to go out and preach the word of God. Spent 9 years in Africa because he felt God wanted him in Africa. And so Vodi is not someone that I believe was irresponsible, but we have to support our widows. When one of our soldiers, and a soldier this important, passes away, we got to support their wives and families. If the mafia does it, why can't we? And we should. And so, Tom, welcome to the Harmony Channel, and fill in some gaps that I may have left out. You were friends with Vodi for more than 20 years, work with him closely at Founders Ministry. Fill in some gaps that I may have left off here.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. And thank you so much for calling attention to this. Bridget and those 7 kids at home are just precious as they can be. Vodi was the sole source of income for the family. And as you said, you know, he traveled all over and gave himself to preaching the gospel the last 9 years over in Lusaka, Zambia, helping to get the African Christian University off the ground as the Dean of Theology there. Most recently, he was named the president of our new Founders Seminary. We just had our convocation 4 days before the Lord called Vodi home, and he and I spoke. We're going to release that video soon of his message, but we spoke often after that in the days immediately past it. And he just said, "This is incredible. I've come full circle. This is what I wanted to give my life to." And then the Lord took him in ways that are inexplicable to us, but leaving his wife and kids without a source of income. And I talked to his lawyer, who called me quickly after we made the announcement, and he said, you know, they're going to need help. I had been involved in helping to raise money when Vodi had a very serious, life-threatening, almost killed him, heart incident 5 years ago. And he asked me if I could consider doing this again. It's my joy to do that. I love this family. Vodi was a brother to me. And anything I can do to encourage people to support his widow and now fatherless children. James says, that's pure and undefiled religion, to support those in need like this.
Where do listeners, supporters need to go to give?
Yeah, they need to go to givesendgo.com givesendgo.com/Balcom Family, givesendgo.com/Balcom Family, or they can go to founders.org, and there are articles there with links to this website as well where they can make their donations.
And Bauckham is spelled Baucham, family. So
That's correct.
givesendgo.com/Bauckham family. Generally speaking, we're quiet about charity. The Bible advises us to be quiet about charity. I think in this case, our heart's in the right place. And so I'm not going to be quiet about supporting Vody and his family. I think God knows my motives. I think anybody that saw me interact with Vody, saw me bring Vody here to Nashville for roll call, knows I'm not trying to build up myself. There's a need here. We had a soldier go down, and we cannot leave his family unattended, unsupported. That's
Amen.
unbiblical.
Amen.
So I've given and will give again in all likelihood. I've already given twice, probably going to go for a third scoop. I do it with ice cream. Why not do it for Vody's family? Anyway, Tom, thank you so much for setting this up and making the time. We just want to push it out there as much as we can on social media and on the show. There is a need here. And last thing, because I've had people question me, hey, the goal is $2 million. And I want you to fill in my gaps here, but hey, man, he's got 7 kids at home.
Right.
And we're not talking about, hey, we just trying to get through the next year. We're trying to make sure the home is paid for and there's a foundation so that they can move forward with dignity. This is someone that believes in homeschooling. Final thoughts.
Yes, sir. Well, you're exactly right. And that figure was coming from Mark Welton, who's overlooked their finances and trying to determine what would they need to invest in order for Bridget to be able to stay home. And another little piece of this puzzle people may not know, but he had a house in Lusaka, Zambia, and he had a buyer that came and offered him cash last year for it if he would get out by December 1st. And so he and his family packed up immediately. They didn't have much time, moved to the United States. They've been living in Airbnbs. They still are right now. And that sale of that house fell through. And so they didn't get that money. And there's another buyer that came, and through some political intrigue, the president of Zambia issued an executive order saying that the certain regions couldn't have land transactions right now. And that happened just a few days before the second buyer's contract was to be executed. And so they don't have that. God willing, they'll get that eventually, but they have been literally living out of suitcases since December 1 last year. And here in Cape Coral, they found a house, secured it, but they're not able to move into it yet because it's got to have some renovations done to it. So anything anyone can do to help, it's the right and good thing to do. And I just thank you so much for calling attention to it, brother.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you. And givesendgo.com/Baucham family, BAUCHAM family.com. Whether it's $20, whether it's $2,000, whether it's $2 million, whatever, $10, $5, please support Vody and his family. All right, I want to keep it moving and get to our topic today. Joy Reid and Don Lemon, cast-offs, one from CNN, the other from MSNBC. Man, they are struggling to make it out here in these YouTube streets and just away from the corporate media legacy. They've been saying some really, really crazy things, and we're going to bring on Shemeka, Chad Jackson, Virgil, and Wilfred Reilly to talk about it. Let's start with Don Lemon, a classic, love the fruit, hate the tree Negro. He's married to a white man, but he thinks white men are broken, or a white man has broken Don Lemon is probably more accurate. Let's play SOT number 11. Here's Don Lemon.
Men who look like you, men who vote like you, and men who sound like you. White men, something is broken. Something is cracked deep inside when so many of you believe the answer to fear, to loss, to change is violence. Are you listening to me? I hope I'm saying it loud enough for the people in the back.
That's such an incredibly stupid and easy to refute, rebuke, retort. It's just, I don't, Don Lemon has always been difficult for me to understand. This feels almost intentionally stupid so that he can be mocked and ridiculed by people that disagree with him, so that he can spark a conversation about, because people start coming, have you looked at the statistics on the violence among black men? Did you look at the violence that happened as a result of George Floyd and Jacob Blake and Trayvon Martin and Michael Brown and Eric Garner, so on and so forth? Are you kidding? Are you kidding me? Here's the second one, and this is from Joy Reid, equally as stupid. This is Joy Reid describing fascism and how Donald Trump and MAGA is going to return us to fascism. Let's play SOT 12.
Is that if you go back before the 20th century, there were no income taxes, there were no regulations on business. You could earn as much money as you want, leave 100% of it to your children with no taxes. Right. That's the world they want back. And to get it back, they need society to change. They need people to be less modern. They need people to want fewer things.
Joy Reid almost, when I heard that, I was like, is she talking about heaven? No taxes? I get to earn as much as I want? I get to leave it to my family? Man, that sounds awesome. When we say make America great again, if that's what they're talking about, man, sign me up immediately. Let's get to our panel without further ado. Wilfred is the voice we haven't heard from the longest. So we'll start with Wilfred. Wilfred, who's made the dumber statement here, Don Lemon or Joy Reid?
I'd probably, it's tough competition, but I'd probably have to say Joy Reid. You know, Don Lemon, I mean, I think everyone on the panel knows this, but, you know, crime is high across the board in the USA. But if you look at murder, black murder rate, 7 times the white murder rate. So, I mean, there are some white-dominated crimes, too, but that's an absurd racist thing to say. But Joy Reid, yeah, I mean, first of all, she doesn't know what fascism is. I mean, fascism is, you know, a system, business and government working together, blah, blah, blah. But secondarily, Jason, I mean, we're on the right here. So, I mean, when you said this sounds like heaven, you kind of stole my joke. I mean, she went through, you're not going to pay taxes. The government's not going to be involved in every aspect of life. You can leave 100% of your money to your son or your little girl. I mean, I would be very comfortable, you know, keep basic laws against murder, some race stuff in place. Very comfortable going back to that world. So I'd have to give the award to Joy.
Shemeka, who's the dumbest here?
Well, I would say Don confused me because when he talked about something being broke, I didn't know if he meant broke off, like in him, he was breaking it off in his white male partner. I wasn't sure. But as far as the dumbest, it would definitely be Joy. You know, I've seen a lot of women dye their hair bleach blonde because trying to hide the grays. And I've been thinking about it, but now I'm wondering if that bleach is seeping into her brain and just causing her to sound real dumb. That was the silliest thing she said. And I thought what she said about Charlie Kirk when she thought she was revealing something deep and hidden, when she talked about the man who actually helped him get started with Turning Point. But I think this one took the cake.
All right. Joy Reid, the leader in the clubhouse. Chad, you agree that Joy Reid dumber than Don Lemon here?
Well, first, let me just say that I feel like I finally made it since I'm on a panel with a great and hilarious Shemeka Michelle. and and it's cool to see, I guess, a sixth panelist on the panel with Wilfred's cat. So there's that. It is I don't know. I think they're kind of tied. It's interesting because with Don Lemon, I think that this is an exhibition of what the kids call crashing out in public. When you look at, since his departure from CNN, he's just been spazzing out and crashing out ever since. I remember when he reprimanded his audience because they weren't following him as much as they were following some conservative influencers and commentators. And he said to them, like, he's the one who's doing the most truth telling, and he's the one who's bringing the facts and calling truth to power. Why aren't you all following me? And we also see with Don Lemon how, he went on Piers Morgan's show and was saying that he's not right, nor is he left. He's just for truth, which we know that's anything but true. He is a leftist through and through. And then when you look at, Joy Reid, she's making all these claims against fascism, which I'm not sure she knows what the word means. But what she's doing is an exhibition of Marxism. She's a Marxist through and through. She believes in centralized power. And I think, that clip tells us everything we need to know about that. So for me, it's a tie. What they're saying is what both of them are saying is equally stupid, in my opinion.
2-0-1. Virgil, where do you come down?
I'm looking at both of them as equally stupid. However, I'm going to give the lead to Don Lemon, and here's why. He should have, when you go back and think about Don Lemon's trajectory, initially, he was actually on the air talking about black fatherlessness and the need to have black men in the homes. There was a time when he was honest about things, where he would say things like that were helpful for the black community. Since then, he's come on and I guess needed to appeal to his leftist donors to the degree that he's acting as if the whole world is about to crumble down because of white-on-white violence or white crime or white criminality. And the idea that white people, one of which he's quote-unquote married to, I put that in air quotes because there's no such thing as gay marriage, is a white man. And so if white people are this detriment to society, white males in particular are broken. I won't even go into what Shemeka Michelle just said about being broke, but how in the world is he married to one? That makes absolutely no sense in any way, shape, or form whatsoever. It's absolutely stupid. I'll just say this as it relates to Joy Reid. Her estimated worth is somewhere between $5 and $11 million. And for her to hold on to any of that after what she just claimed is fascism, she would have to call herself one as well. So none of these things make any kind of sense. They're looking outwardly rather than opening their eyes to see that everything that they're talking about actually has an inward impact and really says more about them than it does about anyone else.
That's right.
Wilfred, one of my big takeaways from these two guys back to back saying this is like a DEI commercial, that CNN and MSNBC weren't picking the best and brightest. They were actually picking perhaps two of the dumbest to put in these positions, and now left to their own devices, we get to see how disconnected they are from truth and common sense. And it's I sit there and watch that. I go, oh, no wonder Shemeka Michelle would never get a job on MSNBC. No wonder Wilfred would never get a job on CNN.
Yeah, and that's why no one watches this crap, right? I think this is something that's pretty important. Like, the major network news channels for a very long time went all in on diversity. They went all in on these pseudo-intellectual types from the political left. And you can check how that worked. Like, when Jimmy Kimmel briefly got canceled, I looked up his numbers, and in the core demographic, whatever that 18 to 49, he had 129,000 viewers. Jason, you're, I assume, beating that number by a good margin. I have 150,000 followers on Twitter. So to some extent, this is a facade. You have this sort of, this is the real media. This is what's on in airports. There's nobody's paying attention to it at all. And I mean, Don Lemon, he's not even a part of that ecosystem anymore. He's filming YouTube shorts from his truck. So I do think that we're kind of getting to see what's behind the veil. And kind of last point here, you know, I made a comment about Ta-Nehisi Coates on social media the other day. I had a bit of an exchange about that. But there's this whole world of these guys, and they're not all black, right? There's Professor Ibram Kendi, there's Ta-Nehisi, there's Don Lemon, there's people on the View panel that was kind of trotted out during the end of that 2020s BLM eras. These are the intellectuals. These are the experts. These are the people you have to listen to. But they're all morons. And I think most people are starting to recognize that and saying, no, we're going to find other sources of information. Anything's better than this.
I'm going to let you dwell on that for a minute. And Chad, I'm going to have you follow in on your point about Ta-Nehisi Coates, who went on, I think he's with Ezra Klein, and he's talking about how Charlie Kirk is a hate monger, and people now have found their voice and are willing to say, like, this is racial grift, it's stupid, he's a hack, and keep his book, Between the World and Me, is one of the best-selling books, and he's been celebrated as this brilliant writer. And Wilfred, I look at this, and it makes me question everything I've been told about the past. Like, this is why I look at someone like James Baldwin and say, man, they told me James Baldwin was this great writer, and it makes me suspicious of everything that they celebrate, that Ta-Nehisi Coates was supposed to be this great intellectual thinker, and he's just not. He's a more polished, smarter sounding version of Don Lemon, but you know, you can only dress that up so much. Wilfred?
Yeah, I mean, so good chance for a plug there, big bro. I mean, I wrote a book actually called Lies My Liberal Teacher Told Me about this problem, that we've had people that are on the center left to the left that come from maybe 20 colleges total, running the media, running academia for decades in the USA. So yeah, a lot of these narratives about the past aren't necessarily any more true than what we're told about today. That's a very important point. In the book, I mean, I talk briefly about white flight. And that's presented as the idea that in the 1960s, in cities that had long been integrated, I mean, you're talking about Detroit, you're talking about Cleveland, white people just suddenly got astonishingly racist and for no reason at all left their old neighborhoods. And what really happened was that you saw mass migration from the South. This is the last part of the Great Migration. You saw the start of that new wave of immigration, Hart-Celler immigration. And at the same time, you saw liberal city governments basically stop enforcing the law. So you had the MLK riots, you had the JFK riots, you had the Watts riots, and people eventually said, you know, to bleep with this and left those communities. And you can track that, and I do track that in the book. So the idea that this is just, there's unprovoked, nothing to do with crime, racism from those white devils, like that's what I was taught in school. And I think there were a lot of things that were taught in school that just weren't so. Gay marriage was mentioned a couple times on this panel. You know, at the time, I supported that to some extent. I think the idea was, well, this is it. This is the end. This is the last civil rights movement. And I see panelists shaking their heads. No, immediately after that happened, it was trans rights. It was the transition to something else. And the story about what had just been pursued changed. So, yeah, I think that happens. That happens pretty often, Jason.
Chad, Ta-Nehisi Coates, and I think I'm right about one of the books that I thought of in recent months. I was reading up on, and I read it as a kid, but I think it's Richard Wright's book, Native Son. I read it as a kid. Everyone says it's this great book. And then here in the last few months, I went back and looked at it and read descriptions of what I read. And I'm like, this is utter trash. And they had me believing this was some great piece of literature, all-time great. And you know, James Baldwin, when I was a kid, I didn't know much about him, but I just know that he was supposed to be this great black writer, and he wasn't, and he's not, and neither is Ta-Nehisi Coates. And just your reaction to that, Chad?
Yeah, you're absolutely spot on. I mean, with Native Son, it has a political purpose, and that purpose is to convince readers that the issue of crime has to do with poverty and it has to do with race. And as a result of this, the call to action, and you hear this and you see this from those who teach Native Son to students, is there needs to be an overhaul of our system and in our economy. And we need to usher in some kind of redistribution economy that is, in a sense, meant to soften or to slow the growth of crime. If we had redistributionist policies, if we lived in a society from each according to their ability to each according to their need, then we would see less crime. So that's what the actual goal of books like Native Son are. The same is true of Invisible Man, books that we were told were
Invisible
great
Man's the other one, yes.
Yeah. And so when you look at people like Ta-Nehisi Coates, or you mentioned James Baldwin and others, what their work is reminiscent of cultural Marxism. And we see cultural Marxism permeating throughout the institutions, whether you're talking about the universities, whether you're talking about entertainment, whether you're talking about literature, so on and so forth. And I mean, this dates all the way back to W.E.B. Du Bois. I mean, he's another one who we were told was this kind of great thinker and great leader. He was an avowed communist, and he's been a communist for a very long time. He wouldn't become a part of the Communist Party formally until, well into his older years. But the reality of it is, when you look at a lot of these kind of peddlers of race grievance in academia, in literature, in entertainment, I mean, in sports even, you see people like LeBron James and others, there seems to be this kind of rite of passage if you want to be considered a part of the mainstream. And that rite of passage is to kiss the ring of cultural Marxism. And your goal becomes to embitter your followers, your fans, those who listen to you, to embitter you perpetually, that you might be ripe for legislation, for politicians who come along and promise liberation, promise equality and equity and all the things. And the reality of it is, if you can change public opinion in that way, it has electoral effects downstream. And so that's, I mean, leftist Marxists, they kind of pride themselves in storytelling. They pride themselves in the ability to not only call truth to power, as far as the political process is concerned, but also to mobilize the masses and to emotionalize the masses into being ripe and ready for a kind of Marxist utopia. And the reason they do this is because they understand, and maybe not them, because I think that they are dupes for ideological subversion, and they just kind of do what they're told and they dance how they're told to the tune. But the brighter ones among them, the more crafty ones among them, understand full well that everything that Joy Reid was saying in her little clip about not wanting to be overtaxed, about wanting to be an autonomous individual living in the United States where you're not, your rights are not infringed upon by the federal government and so on, they understand that that is desirable to a lot of people. And so if you can, in a sense, knock people off their square, get them angry, get them upset, get them embittered, they'll be all the more willing to collectivize and call for the government to come in and do something about the thing that they're grieved about. And that's the purpose, that's the name of the game.
Shemeka, be patient with me. Virgil, be patient with me, because I got to ask Wilfred this follow-up question, then I'm going to come with a different version to you all. But when Chad just mentioned Invisible Man, and that is the actual book. And I do remember, I read Native Son, and I know I know the agenda behind that. But the book that I definitely remember reading and just reread or read a description of, The Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison, and just how sexually perverted that book is. If you go back, and I'm like, and they had me read this as a kid. Every other Ralph Ellison, Invisible Man. It's like, and it's got all this sexual perversion stuff in it. And that's not even my question. My question is to Wilfred, to you as a college professor and educator, is the book that's still on my shelf, that I love and have had young relatives read. I've read it. I probably read the book 3 or 4 times. Love it as a movie. But To Kill a Mockingbird, is that a great book, or is that just more leftist propaganda?
Well, that book, I think, is both. And I will say, when you look at the stuff from the 1960s, so I actually reached over to my bookshelf, you know, I'm a black man, and I found Soul on Ice by Elridge Cleaver, which is another one of those books
Read it?
that
Yeah.
everyone in an edgy high school class was assigned. And I mean, I recently reread that book again, and the guy was a rapist. I mean, he told some interesting stories about conflict with the police or how to make money, but a big part of the book, about 20 pages, was him chasing down women with a knife. And this was just sort of black and white, by the way. And this was just sort of played off like, well, of course he was a rapist. He didn't have enough resources. And I think he taught in a couple colleges. I mean, so that's something that you really have to keep in mind about all this content. Like, this was viewed as revolutionary material. It was intentionally put in the pipeline for normal kids. We're seeing the same thing today, by the way, with the LGBTQAI plus content. Like, every third children's book, if you go with your girl to the library, is about like a giraffe that wants to be a dolphin or something like that. And I mean, it's pretty obvious what the message is. To Kill a Mockingbird is a little different in that is it's a good story. I'd still call it a very good book. You know, people named their kids Atticus, and they meant well when they did it. The problem with that, of course, is that it is a preset storyline that did happen sometimes, but was never the majority. It was never the reality of crime or of racial interaction. So the whole thing is, I mean, a black man is accused of raping a white woman. A man is accused of raping a woman if you get rid of the adjectives. And it turns out that, of course, he's innocent. The woman set him up. I mean, it's sort of the one narrative about that time in the South that you could tell. I mean, when I wrote my book, one of the things that surprised me was that there are only about 5,000 lynchings all time in the USA. About 2,000 of them were of whites and Native Americans, and a lot of the people were guilty. That doesn't excuse a mob breaking through the police line and going to the courthouse, but I mean, there were, in a lot of the cases, lynching of Italians in New Orleans, people were accused of shooting the police chief, and they probably did it. So those are the 3 things that I picked up as an adult, and you realize, oh, even the narratives that are real, there was oppression, there was racial conflict in the South, those are wildly exaggerated. Those are channeled into a particular pipe. You're not going to talk about black crime or poor white crime or even desegregation. You're going to talk about just this endless fantasy of oppression. That's what's being taught.
Shemeka and Virgil, this is where I'm going to bring it to you guys. He's take Emmett Till and how much focus has been on that with no telling. It's in the movie, shockingly, but like black men participated in the beating and killing of Emmett Till. That's never centered. But my whole point about all these books, you know, Virgil's closer to my age than Shemeka, but we all grew up at a time when we would read these books, and it helped shape our worldview that our whole life is centered around what happened between us and white people. And that's kind of our worldview. And I got to a point where I was like, is that really my reality? Is that, you know, when I was growing up in the hood in Indianapolis, how much of my interaction was actually with white people? Wasn't my whole life about me and my family and my friends off of 38th and Grand Boulevard in Indianapolis? What wasn't, you know, what am I doing? And so there's this shaping of young minds through these novels, through these books, through this educational system that convinces you whatever happens between you and white people is far more important than whatever happens to you between you and black people and you and your family. It makes the white man your God. And it's a very subtle, clever thing that they're doing. That was my experience as I look back at my educational experience. Shemeka, does that resonate with you?
Absolutely. I feel like everything we learned kind of centered around that, so much so that I remember I started teaching my children that. And my daughter had a project to do at school, and it was something like, if you could design your own world, or if you were over Earth, how would it be? And she did her project with a black Barbie on top. So it was run by women. She made the Barbie have an afro, because we both took some of our hair and put it on, and held the Barbie's arm up with the fist. And at the time, we were living in a 4-bedroom, 3.5-bath house with 2 Mercedes and an Escalade in the driveway. Yet she was thinking that black people are so oppressed, and that white people needed to be gone from the earth so that we could be better. And something dawned on me then, like, she is actually in a better position than many of the white and Hispanic kids that she's going to school with. What am I teaching her? So I'm so glad that I had that kind of aha moment when they were very young, so that I could start going back and unteaching some of the things that I learned. And I'm still going through that. There was a time when I hadn't heard of the term cultural Marxism, and I hold clothes for a very long time. One, because I've had 3 children and I didn't get fat and out of shape, yay me. But 2, because I don't like to shop. And so the other day I pulled out a shirt that I thought I was going to wear, and I looked at it, and on the shirt it says, "I love my roots." But it was this head of a woman, and the strands of hair were all these different people who were into cultural Marxism. And I saw Angela Davis, and I thought about just how in school we were trained to think Angela Davis was this strong black woman that we should want to grow up and be just like her. And I was thinking, my goodness, I've had this shirt for so long, but I can't even wear it anymore, because so many of the people on there, I would not believe with their I would not agree with their ideology now, and I just can't promote it. So yes, we were definitely trained to think a certain way, and I no longer buy into it.
Yeah.
Virgil, I want you to chime in here.
Yeah, just we've been subject to, for decades now, impactful narratology. And that's really what's happened for quite some time. Whether you know it was James Baldwin in the 60s and 70s, or whether it's Ta-Nehisi Coates today, we have been subject to their narrative that they've crafted for black people to believe. And we, unfortunately, don't go check out the sources. We love a story. And so going back and looking, you mentioned Emmett Till, going back and looking at actual reports of what took place during the time, it's not something that the average person is actively doing or engaged in. They've accepted the narrative that's been given, the cultural narrative that's been given, and usually it's been given by cultural Marxists. And then as a result, we believe those ideas and then press them forward and tell those stories to our children and our children's children. What's interesting about men like Baldwin, men like Coates, is that their stories are empowered by white liberals who bring them into academia. And so for all of the angst and anger that they have toward white people, as if white people have done them wrong and have oppressed them for decades, these are the same white people welcoming into academic spaces and places for them to actually tell these stories to the applause of white people and their own, self-congratulating themselves because they've listened to this quote unquote black story, and the story gets passed around. It's given validity because of the fact that it was told in an academic setting. And so this whole narratology, all of this ideological framework gets just spun up to the point where people like Shemeka, her daughters, they believe what they've been told, and they have no framework, no foundation by which to go and examine the truth until they come across a story like or a conversation like the one we're having, whether they engage historians like Chad Jackson, our brother Wilfred here, who's telling what really took place. so that people can go back and look. But most of the times, we're the ones who are mitigated to, hey, those are just Uncle Toms. Don't listen to them. They don't know what they're talking about. They have no idea what truth is, and they've sold out. When the reality is, those who have sold them out are the ones who are subscribing to white supremacy. And the white supremacy they subscribe to is the idea that whites every day wake up able to oppress you and I in some way, shape, or form. And that's what's the problem.
Wilfred and Chad, I'm going to have you guys land the plane with me. I talk to Shemeka and Virgil all the time. I get tired of hearing Virgil's voice. Shemeka, you can hang around. Virgil, I'm going to let you go. We can look at Shemeka, but I just don't want to hear from Virgil anymore, so we're going to let Virgil go. But I'm going to land the plane with Wilfred and Chad here. W.E.B. Du Bois, who I think Chad may have referenced. Wilfred, I'm going to come to you first, then Chad, I'm going to let you close us out. I can remember when it was 15 years ago, when I finally figured out why I don't like W.E.B. Du Bois or Du Bois or whatever his name was. I figured out this talented 10th thing. You remember he said that there's 10% of black people that's going to take care of and be the leaders and take care of the other 90% of black people. And I finally had an epiphany talented 10th? That was never me. I was a good football player, and maybe I cracked that talented 10th, but who W.E.B. Du Bois is talking about, he's not talking about me. I was a lazy student that no one, people thought I had potential academically or whatever, but, I'm not getting invited to no Ivy League universities, that I'm a Ball State guy. My father didn't graduate high school. My mother was a factory worker. And this light-skinned Negro's arguing that there's this 10% of folks that need to take care of me, and I'm just like, these are the people I can't stand. They think they're better than me. They think they're better than the Ball State graduate with a 2.3. They think they're better than, family that, all of my family's friends, and they were all factory workers and blah, blah, blah. And that's when, and I'm telling you, this probably happened to me 15 years ago. That's when the lights really went off for me. And I got comfortable with the fact that, I really can't stand these Ivy League elites. I just really can't. And it made me rethink W.E.B. Du Bois and the whole talented 10th deal. I was like, this is Marxism. This is what I don't like. Anyway, I'll start with you, Wilfred, how should we remember W.E.B. Du Bois?
Well, first of all, let me give a shout out to Southern Illinois University. There are a lot of light-skinned and even Caucasian guys that were broke at one point in life. But yeah, I've always agreed with you about Du Bois. I think Booker T. Washington is the most underrated kind of major black public figure. So what Du Bois said during the early part of the civil rights era was that he wanted the black elite to be able to compete with the white elite. That's what really all that breaks down to. Du Bois was a product of Harvard, I believe, Exeter. He walked everywhere in white gloves. He had a gold-hilted cane in his hand. And he was irritated that the ruling class of the black community, you see some of this in the Divine Nine. You see some of this now as actual Nigerian lords come over and intermarry. They were treated roughly still then by the white elite, and in many cases had as much education, had as much money. So he wanted civil rights. He wanted integration at the top level of business and politics. And what Booker T was saying is, at this point, he said in one of his speeches bluntly, most white people can't read. The black community was a step behind that. So you needed to teach people these very basic skills, hygiene, how to avoid pregnancy. And of course, the best way to do that is get married, then have kids. But, how to defend yourself with a rifle, how to learn a trade. And he actually set up a college, and a pretty good one, Tuskegee, to teach people to do that. So there you had this dueling position. There's the guy who wants the elites to integrate and intermarry. He wants to eliminate racism in the top class. And I don't really think Du Bois cared whether black and poor white sharecroppers fought each other. I certainly have never seen him mention it. Then you had the other guy that wanted to teach practical skills that would move the community forward. And that was the whole idea of back of the ballot. It's a good idea to be able to vote, But in addition to that, you have to be able to read who the candidates are. You have to be prepared to be a competent citizen. I mean, Booker T said, whether he likes him or not, a white man will respect a black man who's married and owns a 3-story brick house. And I think that's a good message that we've almost forgotten. So yeah, I tend to agree with you on Du Bois.
Chad, I'll let you land the plane here.
Yeah, so a lot of people don't know this, but when you look at somebody like a W.E.B. Du Bois, who people believe was the founder of the NAACP, that's actually not the case. He was the leader of something called the Niagara Movement, and the NAACP was started by a bunch of white and Jewish socialists. Chief among them was one Mary White Ovington. And W.E.B. Du Bois was basically the kind of black face that was plastered at the front of it to make it look like a black-run movement. And the NAACP, I mean, one could argue that they are responsible for helping to overthrow and to repeal some of the Jim Crow laws that were on the books. But by and large, they have been a movement that has done more to embitter Black culture than to empower Black culture. And Wilfred Reilly is absolutely right. When you look at Booker T. Washington, who was advocating for casting down your bucket where you are, stop begging white people and stop protesting and picketing, but, you know, resolve to be a better man, resolve to be a woman of virtue, and things will work itself out. When he gave his speech in the late 1800s in Atlanta, the Atlanta Exposition speech, which the leftists later tried to lambast and dismiss as the Atlanta Compromise. But when he gave that speech, he had a standing ovation from Blacks and whites in the audience. And when you look at the effects of Booker T. Washington and his teachings, they actually had real impacts in terms of basically healing race relations and breaking down race barriers. You saw the falling away of Jim Crow laws at the private and local level. This was happening until the communists would come and agitate and disrupt and do all the things that they continue to do to this very day. And so, yeah, I mean, W.E.B. Du Bois, again, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, along with his contingent. These are people who are given platforms by elitists, white elitists, non-Black elitists, to occupy this position and occupy this role of instilling bitterness into the masses. Once again, that they would refuse to use their God-given abilities, the mind and limbs that God has given all of us to be fruitful and to multiply, to subdue the earth. We have that ability within us. We don't need to rely on a talented 10th. We don't need to rely on the so-called expert class, which people like Walter Lippmann and Ed Bernays and others advocated for. I mean, they've done a number on us, Black, white, and others, over the course of the 20th century, with the spread of cultural Marxism, with the dissemination of various social justice movements that had to do with race, that had to do with sexuality, that had to do with poverty, and a whole number of things. And it's interesting because a lot of your even Black conservative thinkers today, I don't know if they realize it or not, but they too tout Marxist rhetoric insofar that you have some of them, I won't name any names, who say, well, you know, we should move past race-based policies. That's out. We should embrace King's idea of a colorblind society. We shouldn't focus on race policies anymore, which I agree with. We need to focus instead on class-based policies. We need to focus on affirmative action for class in order to help uplift those who are impoverished. I don't know if they realize how much they're playing into Marxist ideology when they do this. And again, these are people who come from an affluent background. These are people who didn't grow up in urban areas or the inner city or what have you. And they're doing just as much damage as those who are arguing for race-based policies, insofar that to the extent that you try to bring the government along and pass all these policies, extract wealth from those of us who are paying taxes from each according to their ability, and disseminate it to those who are impoverished to each according to their need. To the extent that you do that, that de-incentivizes the conventional means by which one becomes successful in a country like America. And so they're actually doing more harm than good. There's a book called When Helping Hurts. I forget who wrote it, but it's that basically that concept of to the extent that you try to
I think Rhoda
enact
is,
all these policies.
I'm sorry.
But yeah, to the extent that you try to enact all of these policies with the idea of helping, it actually has an adverse effect, and we can see that. We have case study after case study after case study to see that, and so it's a wonder why these elitists continue to advocate for these policies, be they conservative or liberal, and it's irritating. Me, I'm a blue collar man. I own a plumbing company here in Texas. I was born and raised here in Texas in a lower middle class family, and so I think when you come from my kind of background, you see, growing up in rural Texas, you see that the way that one becomes successful is by using their God-given limbs and their God-given mind to make their way. But we have been indoctrinated and trained through the institutions, through secondary and primary public education, to be statists, to be functional statists. And again, when you look at the legacy of people like W.B. Du Bois, Martin Luther King, and others, it begins to make sense.
Chad, Wilfred, thank you so much. Did Shemeka stick around? Shemeka left? Shemeka left. Shemeka left, huh? Anyway, thank you guys. We'll see you next time. Appreciate you guys being available. That's it, and that's all. We'll play some harmony, and we'll see you next time.
How did we end up so divided? Stop fighting and stand tall. We used to be a nation, one united. Now we're headed for downfall. God, let your light shine down.